Detective Maria Flores froze as the DNA report printed across her screen. 3 decades of investigation, thousands of leads, and now a single match that changed everything. The suspect wasn't a stranger. It was someone the town trusted most. It began on a humid August evening in 1988 in the quiet, tightly woven town of Madison, Georgia. Population just under 5,000. A place where porch lights glowed late into the night, where people waved at passing cars, and where nothing ever truly went wrong. But that illusion of safety shattered when 22-year-old Sarah Jennings disappeared without a trace. Sarah was well known in Madison, a bright, soft-spoken college student home for the summer, saving money by working shifts at a local diner on Route 83. She was kind, dependable, and loved by nearly everyone who knew her. She dreamed of becoming a teacher, was engaged to her high school sweetheart Tom Weller, and was just weeks away from returning to the University of Georgia for her senior year. On the evening of August 19, 1988, Sarah finished her shift a little after 10 p.m. It had been a slow night, a few regulars, some truckers passing through. She said goodbye to her coworkers, grabbed her purse, and walked out into the warm, sticky night. One of the waitresses, Carol Evans, later recalled watching Sarah wave as she got into her small blue Honda Civic, her taillights fading into the dark stretch of highway. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. When Sarah didn't come home, her parents assumed she might have stayed the night with her fiancé. But by morning, when Tom showed up at their door, asking if they'd seen her, panic set in. At 8:47 a.m., the Madison County Sheriff's Office received a missing person report. Within hours, deputies were canvassing every major road between the diner and her home. At 11:23 a.m., a farmer named Henry Cole noticed something strange off a side road near Lake Oconee. A blue car parked at an odd angle in the weeds. He approached, thinking someone had broken down. But as he got closer, he saw the driver's door was open, the keys still dangling from the ignition, and the purse sitting untouched on the front seat. Henry immediately called police. Detective Alan Bricker, then only 32 years old, arrived on scene within minutes. It didn't look like someone who wanted to disappear, he later told reporters. The car was in neutral, engine off, one headlight still dimly lit. Footprints led away from the road, then vanished near a patch of broken brush. Investigators found a single torn piece of duct tape lying about 15 feet away. They collected it, thinking it might have been trash. No one knew then it would hold the key to the entire mystery decades later. At first, the search was massive. Volunteers from neighboring towns joined local officers, forming lines across fields and riverbanks. Helicopters flew overhead. Dive teams searched the lake. But after a week, there was still no trace of Sarah. No body, no blood, no clothing. With no physical evidence or witnesses, the case grew colder by the day. The investigation turned towards Sarah's inner circle. Detectives questioned Tom Weller, her fiancé, who broke down during interrogation. "I loved her. I would never hurt her," he told police, barely able to breathe between sobs. His alibi, visiting his brother in Athens that night, was airtight. Gas receipts, phone records, and multiple witnesses cleared him completely. Next came coworkers, ex-boyfriends, and even regulars from the diner. None stood out, except one name that came up twice in passing: Ray Dillard, a 27-year-old mechanic who used to stop by for coffee after closing. He wasn't on the suspect list long. He had no record and was seen as harmless. Still, one waitress mentioned that he liked to hang around when Sarah worked. The lead went nowhere. Police didn't have enough to question him further. Weeks turned into months. The story made headlines across Georgia. Madison girl vanishes without a trace. Television crews rolled through town, interviewing distraught residents. Sarah's mother, Linda Jennings, stood before cameras pleading for help. Please, if anyone knows anything, anything at all, come forward. My daughter deserves to come home." But no one did. By the 1-year mark, all active leads had been exhausted. The case file was sealed and marked inactive. The Jennings family refused to give up, hanging posters each year, organizing vigils, and speaking to reporters whenever possible. But as time passed, even hope began to fade. Then came the rumors. Some claimed Sarah had run away to start a new life. Others whispered that Tom Weller had lost his temper over jealousy. One conspiracy theory suggested a serial offender might have been passing through Madison that night. But the truth was simpler and far more horrifying. In 1994, skeletal remains were discovered 30 miles away, but DNA testing at the time was too primitive to confirm any connection. The remains were ultimately ruled out. By 2000, all that was left of Sarah's case were a few yellowed reports, photographs, and a small evidence bag labeled duct tape fragment, location, Route 83. Despite the silence from investigators, Linda Jennings never stopped. She wrote letters to governors, police chiefs, even the FBI. She attended every missing persons conference in Georgia. Her persistence earned her quiet respect and pity from the community. But behind the smiles and small-town charm, Madison carried an unspoken wound. Parents warned their daughters not to drive alone at night. The old diner eventually closed. And every August, locals would look toward the dark stretch of road outside town and remember the girl who never came home. Years rolled into decades. Detectives retired. Evidence rooms were reorganized. Cases came and went, until Detective Maria Flores joined the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's newly formed Cold Case Division in 2023. Flores, 41, was known for her meticulous nature and her expertise in forensic genealogy, a cutting-edge field that had recently helped solve dozens of decades-old murders across the U.S. Her motto was simple: every file tells a story. You just have to listen long enough to hear the truth. While scanning old archives, Flores stumbled upon Sarah's case. She noticed the old duct tape evidence bag still sealed, still labeled possible restraint. Unlike most 1980s evidence, it had been stored properly, meaning the adhesive might still hold trace DNA. She immediately ordered it retested using advanced touch DNA extraction. As she waited for results, Flores read through every page of the original investigation. She was struck by how thorough the early search had been and how close they might have come. She noticed something in the 1988 reports, a statement from that same farmer, Henry Cole, who'd found Sarah's car. He'd mentioned hearing a truck engine that night, one with a distinct rattling sound. He'd assumed it was a passing vehicle. Flores dug deeper. Old DMV records revealed only 4 registered pickup trucks in Madison at the time matching that description. One of them belonged to Raymond Ray Dillard, the same mechanic briefly mentioned in the diner witness notes. It was the first name that made her pause. Dillard was still alive, living less than 20 miles away, running a small repair shop out of his property. He had no criminal record, no prior arrests, married twice, divorced once. To most, he was just a quiet man who fixed cars and attended church on Sundays. Still, Flores submitted the duct tape sample to the Georgia State Crime Lab, cross-checking any possible DNA profile against CODIS, the national database. The test results were pending when weeks later, the system pinged with something Flores didn't expect, a familial match, not direct, but close enough to indicate a biological relative of the unknown male. That's when the case shifted from forgotten to active. Flores requested genealogical analysis, tracing the partial profile to a cluster of relatives in Morgan County, all linked to one common ancestor, the Dillard family. Suddenly, 35 years of silence cracked open. She pulled every record available on Ray Dillard, his employment, his movements in 1988, even his vehicle history. The deeper she looked, the stranger it became. Dillard had worked at a gas station less than a mile from Sarah's diner. He owned a black Chevy pickup with a dented rear bumper, the same detail noted in a 1988 witness statement from a passing trucker who reported seeing a dark pickup behind a small blue car on Route 83 that night. Flores knew what she had to do. She obtained a court order for a surveillance sample, collecting discarded coffee cups and tissues from Dillard's property trash. The lab results came back a week later, a perfect DNA match to the duct tape found beside Sarah's car. Flores printed the confirmation and just stared. That was the moment we started with, the moment she froze at her desk, realizing she had finally uncovered the monster Madison had lived beside for 35 years. But before the arrest, before the confession, there was one final twist, one that revealed just how long Dillard had hidden in plain sight. Sarah Jennings' case was no longer cold, it was burning, and when the handcuffs finally clicked shut around Ray Dillard's wrists, the town of Madison would learn a truth they weren't ready to face. Sometimes evil isn't the shadow lurking in the dark. It's the neighbor who waves every morning. Detective Maria Flores sat in silence, the hum of the fluorescent lights above her the only sound in the cold case unit. The DNA report on her desk confirmed what decades of investigation couldn't. The duct tape found beside Sarah Jennings' abandoned car belonged to Raymond Ray Dillard. She leaned back, exhaled, and whispered to herself, "You've been hiding for 35 years." Flores immediately assembled a small team, 2 field agents, a crime lab specialist, and a local liaison from the Madison Sheriff's Office. They reviewed Dillard's life history like pieces of a puzzle finally coming together. Born in 1961, Ray grew up in Morgan County, working on his father's farm before becoming a certified mechanic. He was quiet, reliable, and good with his hands. By 1988, he was working nights at Bill's Auto Repair, about a mile from the diner where Sarah worked. He often grabbed late coffee there after his shifts. He was friendly, polite even. But according to one waitress, he stared too long and talked too softly. He married in 1991, divorced in 2003, remarried in 2008. No arrests, no complaints, not even a speeding ticket. He was, on paper, a model citizen, but Flores knew what she was looking at. A man who had built his life around appearing ordinary. Flores needed confirmation beyond the DNA trash sample. Under Georgia law, she required a direct court-authorized swab to proceed with an arrest warrant. So she prepared a tactical approach. Quiet, precise, no media, no leaks. On February 4th, 2024, GBI officers conducted discreet surveillance on Dillard's property. The footage was chilling in its normalcy. Ray watering his lawn, feeding stray cats, chatting with a neighbor, the face of an unassuming old man who'd once been the face of evil. The next day, Flores arrived in Madison to coordinate the operation with Sheriff Daniel Hurst, a 30-year veteran who'd grown up hearing about the Jennings disappearance. Hurst, visibly shaken when briefed, said, "My mom used to work with Sarah at that diner. I never thought I'd see the day this case reopened." They decided to approach calmly, no sirens, no spectacle. Dillard was invited down to the station under the pretense of a follow-up on an old property record. He arrived without hesitation, even joked with officers about how long this town's been stuck in the past. Inside the interview room, cameras rolled. Flores slid the manila file across the table. "Flores, Mr. Dillard, we've been reviewing old evidence from a 1988 disappearance, Sarah Jennings. Do you remember her?" Dillard shrugs. "The name rings a bell. That was a long time ago." "Flores, you used to stop by the diner after work. You remember that, right?" Dillard, "Sure, maybe once or twice. Everyone did." Flores, "Then you might remember this." She placed a photo of Sarah on the table. He looked down at the photograph, paused for just a moment, then nodded. "Pretty girl. Sad story." Flores's tone hardened. "We found your DNA on the tape recovered near her car." For the first time, Dillard's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. His hands, folded neatly on the table, began to tremble. "Dillard, that's impossible." "Flores, the lab confirmed it twice. We also found a genealogical link to your family through the database." "It's over, Ray." He stared at her, eyes cold. Then, after several seconds, he whispered something that sent chills through the entire room. "It wasn't supposed to go that far." Over the next 3 hours, Dillard's calm facade unraveled. What began as denial turned into quiet, halting admissions. He said he'd seen Sarah closing the diner that night. He claimed he offered to follow her home, since it was late and the roads were dark. She declined. When she turned onto Route 83, he followed anyway. His truck lights dimmed. He said he only meant to talk to her. But when she pulled over near the curve, panic took over. According to his confession, Sarah realized he was following her and tried to drive off. He blocked her with his truck, got out and tried to apologize. But when she screamed, he grabbed her. "She hit me hard," he said. "I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted her to stop screaming." He wrapped the duct tape around her wrists, forced her into his truck, and drove toward Lake Oconee. Somewhere along the dirt road, Sarah fought back again, kicking, clawing, biting. In the struggle, he struck her. When she went limp, he panicked. "I thought she was just unconscious," he said. "Then I realized she wasn't breathing." He buried her near the tree line at the edge of the lake, using his mechanic's shovel from the truck. He covered the grave with branches and dirt, leaving behind only her shoe and the strip of tape that later became the key to his undoing. When asked why he never came forward, Dillard simply said, "Because I built a life. I became someone else." And no one ever came asking again. After the confession, Dillard was taken into custody at 4:37 p.m. As he was led outside, neighbors gathered along the street, shocked, silent, unable to reconcile the kind old mechanic they knew with the monster in handcuffs. Reporters descended within hours, flooding Madison's streets. The town that had kept Sarah Jennings' memory alive for 3.5 decades was now the center of a national headline. Georgia, 1988. Cold case solved. Local mechanic arrested after 35 years. Detective Flores, standing at the podium that evening, described the moment succinctly. "This arrest was made possible by persistence, technology, and the belief that time does not erase truth." Behind her, Sheriff Hurst added, "Madison has carried this wound for a long time. Today, we begin to heal." 2 days later, under Dillard's direction, GBI search teams descended on a heavily wooded area near Lake Oconee. Dillard guided them to a shallow ridge between 2 pine trees. There, partially buried beneath decades of soil and roots, they uncovered skeletal remains along with remnants of fabric consistent with what Sarah had been wearing the night she vanished. Dusty denim jacket and white tennis shoes. Forensic experts confirmed the remains through dental records and later through DNA testing from a preserved lock of Sarah's hair her mother had kept in an old photo album. When Linda Jennings received the call, she didn't speak for several minutes. She simply wept. "I knew," she finally said. "All these years, I knew she was out there. I just needed to bring her home." The recovery site became a temporary memorial. People from across Madison left flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. Someone tied a blue ribbon around the nearest oak tree, Sarah's favorite color. By June 2024, Dillard was formally charged with murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. The courtroom overflowed on the first day of hearings. Faces from every era of Madison's. History filled the benches. Retirees who'd searched the woods back in '88, former officers, and new generations who had grown up hearing the name Sarah Jennings like a ghost story whispered on warm summer nights. Prosecutors presented the evidence in stark, methodical order. The original scene photographs, the duct tape DNA match, Dillard's recorded confession, and the corroborating witness statements from the diner. The defense tried to argue coercion, that the confession was made under duress, but the DNA was irrefutable. Flores took the stand, recounting the investigative process with quiet professionalism. "We don't bring people back," she told the jury, "but we make sure their stories end with justice." When asked how she felt seeing Dillard in person, she paused and said, "He looked like every man I've ever trusted to fix my car. That's the part that still chills me." After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 4 hours before finding Dillard guilty on all counts. Madison erupted with emotion. Some celebrated, others mourned anew. For many, the relief was mixed with disbelief. The realization that a man who'd attended church potlucks and fixed flat tires for neighbors had carried such a horrific secret for decades. Local pastor Reverend Collins, who'd known Dillard personally, told reporters, "Evil doesn't always come wearing a mask. Sometimes it shakes your hand." The Jennings family finally received Sarah's remains for burial in July 2024. Her casket, adorned with white lilies, was carried through Main Street as townspeople lined the sidewalks in silence. Tom Weller, now gray-haired and living out of state, returned for the service. He stood beside Linda, holding her hand. When asked later why he came back, he simply said, "Because she deserved to be found." After the sentencing, Flores visited Sarah's grave alone. She placed her GBI badge beside the flowers and whispered, "We found you, Sarah. Rest now." In a later interview, she described the case as a turning point for Georgia's cold case program. "This wasn't just a win for science. It was a win for every family that's ever been told to give up hope." The Dillard case prompted the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to create a statewide initiative, Project Reignite, dedicated to reopening unsolved crimes between 1970 and 2000 using advanced forensic genealogy. Since its launch, at least 7 cold cases have been reactivated for testing. The town of Madison installed a memorial bench near the old diner site with a plaque reading, "In memory of Sarah Jennings, 1966 to 1988, may truth always find its voice." Today, newcomers to Madison might pass that bench without realizing its history. But for those who lived through it, the story remains a warning and a reminder. Time may bury evidence, but it never erases truth. And when the arrest came, Madison, Georgia fell silent, because the man who'd lived among them, fixing engines and waving from his porch, had stolen not just a young woman's life, but 35 years of peace. The monster wasn't in the dark. He was right there, in daylight, smiling back. The morning of sentencing arrived under gray skies. The courthouse steps lined with quiet spectators. Some were there for justice, others for closure, and many simply because they'd carried the memory of that missing girl since 1988. Inside, the air was tense. Reporters lined the back wall. Cameras clicked every few seconds, capturing what Madison had waited 35 years to witness. Raymond Dillard was led into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, shackled, looking smaller than the man the town once knew. He didn't look at the crowd, didn't glance toward the Jennings family, sitting in the front row. His face was drained of emotion, the face of a man who'd spent decades pretending to be human while carrying a monster inside. When the judge asked if he had any final words before sentencing, Dillard cleared his throat and said quietly, "I can't change what I did. I wish I could take it back." The room erupted in whispers, but Sarah's mother didn't move. She just stared at him, expressionless, hands clenched around a small silver cross. Then it was Linda Jennings' turn to speak. She stood slowly, every movement deliberate, her voice steady but raw. "You took everything from us," she said, her gaze locked on Dillard. "For 35 years. I've seen your face at the grocery store, at church, even at town fairs, never knowing it was you. You smiled at me. You lived free while my daughter lay in the dirt. I prayed for justice, and now I've got it. You'll never see another sunrise without bars between you and the sky." The courtroom was silent except for the sound of a reporter's camera shutter clicking once, sharply. The judge pronounced sentence: life in prison without parole. No appeals, no leniency. The gavel struck wood, and just like that, 35 years of questions turned into a single moment of justice. Outside, rain began to fall as Dillard was escorted into the prison transport van. People gathered behind the barricade, not to jeer or celebrate, but to simply watch. Some shook their heads, others cried. For a town that had lived under the shadow of a mystery for decades, the ending felt both heavy and hollow. Later that evening, Detective Maria Flores sat alone in her office, reviewing the final reports. Every box on the file was now checked, every lead documented. The case that had haunted an entire community was officially closed. Yet as she stared at the words, "Case status resolved," she felt no satisfaction, only quiet exhaustion. Solving it hadn't brought Sarah back, and that truth hung heavy in the room. She closed the file, stood up, and walked to the evidence board where Sarah's picture had been pinned for months. She removed it carefully, sliding it into an envelope marked "Returned to Family." Before leaving, she whispered, "You were never forgotten." Then she turned off the lights and left the building. Over the following weeks, Madison tried to find its rhythm again. The story spread nationwide, covered by every major network, not just because of the arrest, but because of the sheer passage of time. A 35-year-old mystery, solved through a strand of DNA and a mother's persistence. News anchors called it a triumph of technology and tenacity. But for those who lived there, it wasn't a headline, it was a scar. The diner where Sarah had worked was long gone, replaced by a gas station. The road where her car was found had been repaved, its edges softened by grass and time. Yet locals swore the air there still felt colder, heavier, like it remembered what happened. In August 2024, the community gathered for a memorial service at Lake Oconee, near the site where her remains were found. Dozens came, carrying white flowers. Pastor Collins led the ceremony, reading a passage about truth and light. When he finished, Detective Flores stepped forward, placing a single rose by the memorial stone. "This isn't just Sarah's story," she said softly. "It's proof that silence doesn't mean forgotten, and that justice, no matter how late, still matters." Linda Jennings, now gray-haired but unbroken, spoke last. "For 35 years, I prayed for this," she said. "Some nights, I thought God had stopped listening. But he didn't. He was waiting for the right person to find the truth." She turned to Flores and added, "That person was you." The two women hugged as cameras flashed, capturing the moment that would later define the story's ending. Not the crime, but the closure. In the weeks that followed, Madison changed in small but powerful ways. The Old Town Council renamed the narrow stretch of Route 83 Sarah's Way, and a memorial bench was placed in front of the rebuilt diner with a plaque reading, "In memory of Sarah Jennings. Justice found, but never forgotten." The Georgia Bureau of Investigation used the case as the foundation for a new program. Project Reignite, a state-funded initiative dedicated to reopening dormant cold cases using modern DNA and genealogical technology. Flores became its lead investigator. Her first mission was simple: identify the next forgotten file that still had a chance. In interviews, Flores often spoke about the Jennings case as more than a career victory. "You don't measure success in arrests," she told a reporter. "You measure it in peace, for families, for communities, for the victims who can finally rest." As for Dillard, he now spends his life behind concrete walls and steel doors. Inmates reportedly avoid him, not out of fear, but disgust. His days are silent, his nights long. In a rare prison interview, months later, he told a journalist, "I see her in my dreams sometimes, standing on that road, just staring at me." The reporter noted that Dillard refused to elaborate, his hands shaking as he spoke. Tom Weller, Sarah's former fiancé, never remarried. He lives quietly in North Carolina, working as a carpenter. When asked if he felt closure after the conviction, he said, "Closure's not the right word. You don't close something like that. You just learn to live with it." For the Jennings family, justice brought relief but not peace. Linda once said in an interview, "People think closure means happiness. It doesn't. It just means you can stop wondering." Every year on August 19th, she visits Sarah's grave and leaves a single white rose, the same kind that covered her casket. The town, once haunted by rumors and suspicion, has begun to heal. Yet some nights, when the wind moves through the pine trees near Lake Oconee, locals swear they can still hear faint echoes, like the memory of a voice calling for help across time. Whether it's imagination or something else, no one really knows, but they listen. Detective Flores still keeps a framed photo of Sarah Jennings on her desk, next to a plaque from the Jennings family that reads, "For never giving up." When asked if she believes there are more Ray Dillards out there, killers living quiet, ordinary lives, she nodded. "Absolutely," she said, "and we're coming for them too." That's the legacy of Sarah Jennings, a case that refused to fade, a mother who refused to forget, and a detective who refused to stop digging. Together, they proved that even after 35 years, truth still has a pulse. And in Madison, Georgia, where the streets once whispered with fear, there's finally silence. Not the silence of secrets, but the silence of peace, because the monster who had hidden in plain sight was gone, and the girl who vanished into the dark was at last home.